Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to whatever this is, this thing. So, first things first, we start off doing something big, and that big thing, which I thought I'd leave enough space for it, but apparently it goes by kind of quick. This episode is actually in 3 times speed in order to match the 30-minute quasi-limit I've imposed on myself, so things are just a little bit faster than you remember. And that's just fine because we spend half, if not more, kind of aimlessly mountain building. Although it's not as thorough as last one. And it doesn't, unfortunately, contain any interesting, unusual little decisions or details. Other than a couple of mountain building bits. But the real kicker comes around towards the end of the episode where I told myself that I'd kind of been doing too much mountain building and that I should step aside and do something else, and we end up building a forest, and we also go through and we do some work on the actual buildings in Arturo, which is, good. It's a nice change of scenery in both a figurative and a literal sense, considering we take a step back from this gray monotony that we've been building for so long. But anyways, I filled in those areas so that we would have something just to work on, and not for want of work, really, but just because I wanted to have some sort of closure, no open space, no empty areas hanging out in the middle. And yeah, that was my intention from the get-go, or at least it recently has been, but it was more formalized here. It was more set in stone that I'm not going to be dealing with any sort of holes in the map. And frankly, it does make things a little easier when it comes to deciding where your mountains are going to be and where the peaks are and where they're going to connect to. I ended up making a oh yeah, you guys get to see me do this in 3 times speed. This is annoying to do at normal speed. Also, how many times I screwed up is kind of, Firstly, it's countable, but, say that's number 1. Number 2. But one of the times I actually couldn't undo it, the game wouldn't let me. So that's kind of unfortunate. We come around here and we fill in this edge here, and I have the map up for most, if not all, of this episode, and there's number 3, and I can't fix it. The or the undo button doesn't undo that, so I'm stuck with it, and I have to deal with it later. Kind of ends up blunting our mountain a little bit, but whatever, stuff happens. So I trace the edge of this, and then I come back around and go up and down, and yada yada. I think that's the end of the big mistakes for working on this section. But this is, of course, just to give us a better baseline, as I've talked about before, and then we're going to put a tall, kind of pointy mountain that connects these 3 peaks that we have back here, and that's kind of what discourages me, are the 2 peaks that we have back here in their valley, which is the difficult part, and the large mountain that we kind of just were working on last episode. It's going to end with us rounding off that mountain, not this episode, but it's going to end off with us having a way to get all of this mountaining in place. And although theoretically I could have tossed in a spline point there, or even a broken spline point to give us 2 different slopes, I decided against it and just went with a straight line. And frankly, the reasoning behind that was that I don't have the patience to do anything, huge of that sort. Now, to his credit, I was thinking about this. To his credit, I was thinking of Weibold when I was working on this, and just kind of in my head picturing the kind of cool and intricate designs that he's been making. Also, I was going to do this with a line of gravel. Instead, I did it with a line of plateau. Doesn't matter. It brought us to the same thing anyways, and then we put a piece of track on top of it and adjust that. But back to what I was thinking. Weibold, he puts a lot of effort into his maps. Map, singular, I'm pretty sure, at this point. I don't think he's working on 2 at once. I'm not. I'm in the concepting stages of the Providence and Northern, but other than that, no. But he puts so much effort into that. He does a lot of detail work, and all of his terrain is very. I can't attest to its geologic realism, but it looks real and it looks really good, as opposed to this stuff, which is all pointy mountains. We have our moments, like over in Skyfall Ridge and over in the Triple Valley, at least until you hit the mountain, of stuff that kind of looks good, but nothing that level. So I go ahead and I get the heights of both of these mountains. Oh well, I get the height of one of them, because they're both about the same height. So then I create that's our peak, and then I connect the 3 peaks. Probably could have done better to bring that out a little more and thus make these slopes a little less and make some things a little harder on myself, or a little easier. But doing this, I don't know. It has its sides either way, and I start connecting stuff to kind of build a good framework so that I can figure out what are the triangles that I need to start working in. So, this is, I think, one of the last ones that I make. There was one to there. Yeah, I know. It's got to be one more. Pretty sure. Yeah, right here. And the grand finale, actually, for this is its connection to here. Of course, we can't do that yet because the peak is gone. So I fix this by just kind of, doing nothing fancy and covering it over, so we have a blunt peak instead of a pointy one now, which wasn't in the plan, but maybe it looks better. And I fix that last hole, adjust where this end spline point is going to be, and voila, we have our final mountain sections to work with. Next one is the valley. Now, this valley putting these valleys in the middle of this kind of giant gap was, frankly, its own shade of a mistake in the first place. But, now I'm adjusting that so many times it can't get it to work out right. This area is going to be a little bit messy, and frankly, I just kind of leave it like that, because nobody's going to come and look at it. It's just there. It's kind of on the other side of the backdrop, and even though, it's going to be textured so that the map looks whole and we don't have some big gray spaces. But, really, I don't expect anyone to come wandering over here. This is, train simulator, not flight simulator. You're not going to go flying over these mountains. That being said, I was joking with a couple of my friends about, I think this made it into the War Thunder episode, I don't know. But, I was joking with some of my friends about the fact that you can import maps into War Thunder. And I said, can we import maps from TRS into War Thunder? Of course, they wouldn't have much use as TRS maps any longer. As what they are, but some of them would be cool landscapes to fly over, and I figured, if we could import Tamros, Phil, and Nakonda in. And somebody did point out, I believe it was Achilles that pointed out that the maps, that the Tamros Valley and Nakonda is huge, and that it would be impractical to fly War Thunder over it. But I pointed out that the War Thunder maps are a lot bigger than they seem to be. Tank maps aside, the reason the maps are so big is that you're flying planes, and the planes go pretty fast. Obviously. Generally, if it's not going very fast, it's no longer a plane, it's just a falling object. But, yeah, I don't know the actual sizes of a lot of the War Thunder maps. I couldn't tell you, and I couldn't tell you how big this thing is either. I just don't know. I could eventually tell you how big the Providence Northern is, because I have, they're all actual places, Providence to Montreal, and all the routing in between is real. Or at least it was going to be in a lot of cases. And that, And the only other map that I really know in terms of absolute dimensions is Chernaris from DayZ. And that isn't really helpful because I haven't done much flying over Chernaris. I take that back, actually. No, I did a lot of flying in Armory in the old mod version of DayZ, but not anything as significant as War Thunder, and it's not something that I really remember. I will point out, though, that 16 by 16 kilometer map was, if memory serves, it feels like it was about as big as a War Thunder map is, because I was flying the things around and it seemed like it would be, that would be the same sort of amount of time. I don't know. I'd actually have to look into that. I wonder if the mini-maps you see at the beginning of each battle have any sort of scale on them. I've never looked for it. And, of course, some of them, I mean, there are real locations, most of them. And that means that you could go out in real life or in Google Earth and measure. But I'm not sure how easy that would be, considering you have to find some kind of... that they're not, you know, necessarily defined so well. Especially considering that some of the things in War Thunder that you're flying around and over no longer exist. If you have a map that's pretty much an only land-based one, or only a primarily water-based one where you don't have any defining features near the edges of the map, then you're going to run into trouble when you're trying to map that out in real life and thus get a decent measurement on it. But enough about War Thunder maps. Back to this one. We've, you know, if you've been paying attention to the actual screen, which I wouldn't fault you if you didn't, we haven't gotten to the interesting point yet. But I've just been zipping back and forth and filling in bits and kind of adjusting for the craggy parts that shouldn't exist and the like. But, yeah, fortunately we actually haven't had to worry about that too much. The worst part by far is the valley, and I got that out of the way real quick. Mostly because I don't want to have to think about it anymore. It's like getting the worst part done first. So, we've got this mountain here. We've got one facade of it done, or almost. Once again, this whole area, which is kind of the backdrop of Sisqueaka, finally getting done is something very good, in my mind. We might want to snowcap this, considering it's taller than Sterling Mount is. Sterling Hill, Sterling Mount, Sterling. But I'm not 100% on that. Yeah, well, no, it's got to be, really. How tall was Sterling Mount? I have to go back and look. But that was the initial idea of where I would snowcap things, but we're so close to the ocean. I mean, we're not that high. Although, I'm sure there are some climates out there where you get snow pretty low, and they're still on the ocean. But this probably isn't one of them. I don't know. Do we get snow? Does the Timorous Vale and Anaconda get seasonal snow? That's a good question. The answer is probably. Based on what I've got out there and based on my own personal preferences. And the fact that I'm pretty sure I've driven trains around in snow before, just because I could. Alright, so this is when I decided that it's due time to do something else. And I come around here, and then I come across an interesting dilemma when I hit the hill. There, I stop, and I go, oh crap, wait a minute, I'm going up the hill here. And then I kind of block off an area there. The reason I stopped was because we're hitting that hill, and I mean, if we're going to be completely honest, we're curving very gently towards an angle where you obviously wouldn't see this grass and those trees. So, the trouble is, where do I define that edge? And I don't have a half Maple Beech Birch Spline. I mean, I don't have something that has half the density to kind of stick on the bitter edge. I mean, it could be said that I make these areas so dense that having a regular spline would look absurdly, I don't know, what's the opposite of dense? But I make some mistakes by making these really long splines and not breaking them up with spline points. But that's something we come across later. And then I realized that I'm putting this stuff in predictable patterns, because obviously the spline point, obviously the splines are just that. They're just splines. They don't, have any degree of randomness to them. So we get a lot of rows of trees, and that doesn't matter to me so much away from the track. But closer to the track, I kind of was trying to keep that a little mixed up. And that's also why I'm clicking multiple times, making a bunch of spline points. So you adjust that there so that... One of the things about this game that got me in earlier maps is if you have really long stretches of spline, if you can render part of it, you're going to render all of it. So you see these tracks that stretch way off into the distance, or in this case, lines of trees that stretch way off into the distance, for, that blow away what the actual writing distance is supposed to be, and instead, do their own thing. So we're mixing up this, and we've got some trees there, and then I remember that, I catch another one of those. You can tell when it looks weird. We grab this grass, and we start painting along the side of the track, because that's how it is in Tamaros. Why not keep it that way here? Though, to be fair, I don't know how Tamaros is going to look once we're done with it. Redone with it. But it's probably going to retain the same textures. And I can probably move those textures over to Arturo, which is one of the things I was having in my dilemma only today when I was working on the video itself. Oh yeah, we do this again. It kind of felt weird calling back to this old method of texturing. But hey, whoops, I accidentally moved. And then I hid the map. But hey, it worked, and it's going to blend into some bigger stuff soon enough. Now, we don't actually have any of the true pointy mountains. We have some stuff that was my first forays into it, if you recall some of the earlier episodes down by Golgora. But, gotta rough up that edge a little bit. We have the first forays into it over down by Golgora itself. So the pointier mountains where we used terrain tracks for it the first time. And that first slope that leads up into the tunnel that has an incredible grade on it is also pretty bad in terms of, pretty bad, yeah, we know it's bad. We know it's a bad grade. But my whole point is that it's our first forays into making that. And then I do something really stupid right here. See those bushes, and I think, oh, those are just their own thing, right? They're not part of the spline point or anything. And I try and get them for an obnoxious amount of time before giving up and getting the other trees. And then I place them along the edge here. Just for an extra degree of variety that we wouldn't get otherwise. Then I grab the other little trees as well, and I place a bunch more of those. Or a bunch of those, more than I did of the bigger trees. So here we go. Getting these all cleared up. Or uncleared up, actually. We're populating the ground. And then I go ahead and do this, which frankly should be the prelude of me doing exactly what I did on the other side to this side, and that's what it's going to be. But we're not there yet. Because once I get done with this, I decide, once again, that we've done enough of that for one episode, and I go ahead and do something else that, I don't know, some of you guys might have been waiting for. I know I certainly was. But we'll blow up that bridge when we come to it. Anyways, so something that caught my attention is the fact that we don't have any roads traversing between towns. And now I know originally that was supposed to factor into the plot line in a sort of way. And sure, those towns out in the middle of nowhere won't have any sort of way to get from town to town, and really I don't think there's not going to be any interstate highways or stuff like that. But we are going to have roads that go from place to place. Those roads are primarily going to be the ones that we already have in Galgora, and Tamaros is not lucky enough to have one of those roads yet. Something just occurred to me. We have a lot of flat sections of the river, and ideally the river would be flowing downhill, slowly, but Train's water lack of physics does not permit us to build that. So therefore we're just going to have waterfalls spaced intermittently. Probably in opportune looking locations, which is why I think when we rebuild El Dorado Canyon, we're going to have a waterfall right next to that big concrete bridge that leads down into the canyon. Well, I do want to change a lot of the tracking and a couple other things when we redo it. I really don't want to change what the essence of El Dorado Canyon is, and that is that it's this big red rocks, big river running through it, and you've got these weird little things chalked up on the sides, like you've got your abandoned mine on one side, on that same side, farther down you've got the narrow gauge track that's heading up to Lambert. Frankly, also, we need to edit that, and the El Dorado Canyon rebuild is probably going to come on the heels of Galgora to Lambert. Just like the connection to the farmhouse and the rebuild of Tamaros is probably going to come with Tamaros to Portal. If that is the case. Before I edit something attached to something, I might want to make sure that first something is, still working properly, or is working properly at all. So, maybe something I want to pay attention to. So we clear this up, and we have to come back and patch up those holes that we made, but aside from that, this is a pretty clear-cut area in terms of what to do. It's not something we haven't seen before. And I do want to do more work off camera. If I had the time to spare, I would. Except, unfortunately, doing work like this is slightly antisocial, in a way. In more than a way, most likely. Just because sitting here dawdling on my own, generally listening to podcasts, generally not caring about the outside world when I'm trying to work on the railroad. And thus it's like isolating myself in order to get this railroad work done. Especially if I'm going to record it. I mean, I've abstained slightly from doing work without recording, although now that we have that big extra section in, I may want to do that and then make some dramatic reveals. Unless I'm doing something you guys haven't seen before, I don't really see the tutorial kind of mentality stepping in there, and thus I don't know why you need to see me do it. If it was something new, that'd be different, but we're really just going to be connecting that in a big sort of rectangular plane. I do this, which is something I probably should have done earlier. I should have connected that to the highest point on the mountain. But we'll fix that later. But I like the trees. I like the fact that we have the trees now. Now come in here and look at this, point out how ridiculous it is once again. Fix that. There we go. Okay, so we're going to come over into Arturo to do something new. This is me just contemplating once more on how to do this. I don't know yet. I'll figure it out. I'm looking at my bridge because I like the way it looks, and then I come in here and I do the first thing that I think I should do, and that something is patch up some of the textures here, but it's really as far as I can go, texture-wise. I just don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to work on. in terms of textures. I don't know what textures we're supposed to have, although I could probably do myself a favor and just take a page from Temeros. The one thing that might be solid about Temeros is the textures over in the industrial area. So I go for a while looking for a railroad crossing, putting in different keywords. Then I realized no, never mind. That's not what I realized. I thought I was in the wrong section, but that wasn't the case. I ended up going with a 45-degree one, though, because I see that one there. Spin it around like that. Adjust it, get into the right place, which is really right there. It doesn't need to be anywhere else. And I attach the two ends to it, and voila, we have our railroad crossing. But then I go looking for the road that matches it, and that proves a little bit more difficult. Anyways, we're going to have a bunch of multiple industries in this city, in Arturo. A lot of them I haven't placed down yet, but I don't mean transfer industries. I mean, we're going to have a couple of those as well. But, yeah, this is the road I was talking about. But I mean actual legitimate industries, as in, there's going to be one that accepts oil. See, this one's going to head up there with the narrow gauge. Eventually, it's probably going to hit Nikiri. And we may have another one with bridges that run next to the standard gauge. I don't think the standard gauge is going to be courting a lot of roads, but really, narrow gauge probably isn't either. So that means they're going to have to find their own way, and that really brings in a lot of the extra terrain a little bit more. So I put down some road in front of the stations, connect them over to the other side, line them up right, and then I start looking for buildings to put in here. I'm pretty sure I start just alphabetically from the top of the list. Or no, I go looking for a factory first, and then I realize I've used that one before, and I don't really have a place to put it. So I go looking for things like that one, figure it's too small, then I find a bear. And I decide, why not? Let's have a bear. So now we have a bear. He's gonna hang out. He's, we should give him a name, actually. Somebody name the bear in the comments. What's the bear's name? We get some buildings. These two go well together, which is probably why they were near each other. Get some piles of gravel there, because, you know, you need that for building in the swamp. Accidentally pick a giant barley factory. Put a little stone building down by the edge of town. We could have a little farm down there. These are grain elevators, so I tried to fit them there, it didn't work. Which, honestly, it would make sense to have these at the other end of town where the farm is, but, well, that's big. That's just not how it pans out. That building is just a little bit too big, so I have to put it there, unfortunately. A couple of these two-story buildings, which I would love to have, but they're designed for being on a hill. That which I'd love to have, but we don't have room for. And these are buildings that I could consider putting in Temeros in the future, and if we accidentally build in a sort of barley manufacturing thing, and a beer, I know one of the maps, I'm pretty sure it's the ICE map, has a whole chain of industries dedicated to making beer. And in fact, there's a whole scenario for it called the worst case, of course referring to the worst case of beer. Now, see, this thing, the front of this thing reminds me of the Grand Budapest Hotel, and I'm not really sure why it does. It's just got those two kind of outcroppings. Either way, that's too big. It might be something to go in Empirique in the future. Empirique. This I considered for a while. You'll see it right there. Considered doing that with. Now that's awesome looking, but I didn't want to. I didn't feel like adjusting track, and I didn't want to make it seem like, well, you could slam through the doors. So we've got more shops. I'm building a little row of shops. That's a little bit big. Another church. We already have one. And I find this thing, and this is perfect, because I wanted a diesel drop-off. and it makes sense for it to be over here. Unfortunately, the thing about Arturo that's going to prove difficult is, aside from the narrow gauge, it doesn't have any engine servicing facilities. Of course, I've probably got to put a water tower in somewhere. That does occur to me. But, I don't think... Yeah, no, it doesn't have... It won't have any sort of engine sheds or roundhouses. It might have just a siding for an engine. So we've got our gas station there. Unfortunately, it's not right on the main drag. I could actually put a pipeline in, and of course we need a tower as well. I even forgot I put that building there. But I started to get carried away with these buildings, and that's something we could use in the future. That's perfect, didn't even need to turn it. But, gonna end up bringing this to a halt in just a minute here. We've got that schoolhouse building. Haven't figured out where the districts sort of are going to be. We got this shed that I don't even have to turn around. It's kind of facing the way I wanted it to. But I think that's it for today, and I'll see you guys next week. Trainman out.